There's been a lot written and said about Kevin Young since his hire as BYU men's basketball coach earlier this week. Well, it was finally his time to step to the microphone and explain exactly what he hopes to accomplish at BYU. Obviously, a lot of people excited about this. What did he have to say? We're breaking it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU, and we are brought to you today by our friends over at Monopoly Go. All of us have a competitive side. Scratch that itch with our friends over at Monopoly Go. Is a big fan of what they've got going. It's the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And Kevin Young, new head coach of BYU, finally getting his opportunity to formally introduce himself and BYU to introduce him to the media. And I think the biggest thing about Kevin in taking over this position at BYU is that he has got a lot of things going for him, none bigger than the fact that just a kind of a relative blank slate as to what he can do as a head coach. It's his first foray in college coaching as a head coach. Obviously, he had two very short stints at the very early days of his coaching career. One, what was then Utah Valley State College, now Utah Valley University, and one at Oxford College, which if you were to ask me where Oxford College is, I'd say, you sure it's not the Oxford over there in England? No, it's not. But nonetheless, he has spent the last 15 years in the NBA, and based on the endorsements coming out of the Phoenix area, and you looked at James Jones, Frank Vogel. James Jones, the GM for the Phoenix Suns. Frank Vogel, the head coach who retained Kevin Young on his staff when he took over at Phoenix. And then, this guy named Devin Booker, making a joke yesterday when he was asked about Coach Young going to BYU. He said, no, it's KYU, and he was chuckling about that. And here's the thing. It is Kevin Young University, or KYU. It's kind of a fun play on this, and it'd be fun to have that as a fun thing if things all go well. But the bigger point is there has been just universal praise for Kevin Young as a head coach. And that's really, really cool to see, because he interviewed multiple times over the past 3 off seasons, as I understand it, for head coaching positions in the NBA. For whatever reason, he did not get any of those positions. And that obviously is going to have some people thinking, well, if he can't ultimately land the job, why couldn't he get it? Well, he's only 42, folks, and that's still relatively young in a lot of NBA circles. Now, those of you Utah Jazz fans are going to say, hey, Will Hardy's 38. Okay, I get it. Is he even 38, maybe 37? But hey, different guys have different timelines. There's no doubt about that. But there has been this prevailing storyline. Trust me, I have read it across a bevy of different social media feeds, articles, and the like, talking about Kevin Young turning down the Brooklyn Nets job. Now, what I understand about the Brooklyn Nets situation is a little bit different than what I believe is being reported. And I don't proclaim to know the absolute truth. But in the 3 different people I talked to about that Brooklyn Nets situation, the way it was kind of translated, or not translated, but kind of described to me, is that there was an offer extended at some level to Kevin Young to take over as the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I'm sure the Nets would be very quick to say that's not exactly what happened, blah, 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 blah. But what I understand is that there were reasons, that's what I was told, there were reasons why he ultimately opted not to take the job with Brooklyn. So whatever those reasons were, that ultimately is what allowed BYU to kind of snake their way in and get him as their head coach. Had Kevin Young decided to hang on and maybe pursue other head coaching positions, he very well may have ended up as an NBA head coach. But it sounds like the fact that whatever the reasoning was for him to step away from that Brooklyn position allowed BYU to get themselves in front of him. Speaking of guys like Tom Holmoe, Danny Ainge and Ryan Smith, it's been heavily reported, and I can tell you with certainty that they absolutely were key players in all of this. They were able to get in his ear, kind of sell him on the vision of what they wanted to do with BYU basketball, and essentially convince him that BYU is where he needed to be. I think that this is going to work out in the fact that based on other conversations, one of them had the same source on the Brooklyn situation, but also in talking with that individual, they told me that Kevin, with the 7-year deal at BYU that he's signed up for, and it's been reported it's a 5-year deal with 2 option years, but regardless, let's just go with the notion that it is a 7-year deal. That indicates that he plans on sticking around at BYU for the long term. And that should engender, I think, some confidence slash I think some good feelings about what Kevin Young intends to do with the BYU basketball program. It doesn't sound like, to my knowledge, that he's coming here like Mark Pope was, with the whole intention of using it as a springboard to his future. Mark Pope, and those of you who want to believe it, those of you who don't, I don't really care whichever side of the fence you're on. But Mark Pope, since the second he stepped foot on BYU campus as the head coach, has been endeavoring to take a bigger and better position in his mind, none bigger than the one he landed at the University of Kentucky. His whole goal, his entire career, is to have ended up where he is at today with the University of Kentucky Wildcats. And I wish Coach Pope nothing but the best. He treated me like gold while he was here at BYU. There are other people out there who will tell you a different story about Coach Pope, but regardless, he used BYU to the level that he wanted to get the dream position he wanted for himself. To me, Kevin Young, based on the conversations I've had and the impression I get, is that he wants to come to BYU and build something that's going to last. He wants to be, for lack of a better term, Lavelle Edwards type figure if things go well for BYU basketball. He wants to be here for the long term. He's got the connection to the state via his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's got connections to the university via family. That's how everybody feels like, no matter what level of where you live, you have a connection somehow, if you're a member of the LDS faith, to Brigham Young University. It's just way too natural not to have that. But I get the impression that he has, and the person that, like I said, the person I talked to says that he has plans to make this a long-term thing. He believes that this could be a really, really nice fit for him. And I don't think that the pay is going to hurt half bad either. Come on. BYU's forking over north of $4 million annually. We talked about it yesterday. I love the fact that BYU's finally stepping into the ring and saying, you know what? Let's pay market rate. Let's get out there. We've got the money. Let's start doing it. And yes, part of it, and maybe a lion's share of it, is coming from boosters like Ryan Smith to make this a reality. But the thing is, it's not just the pay for the head coaches, I understand. Is there's an overall investment in BYU basketball that is going to hopefully push this program into overdrive and help it stay among, or if not, well, I'd say the top half of the Big 12, if not that upper echelon of Big 12 teams. This is a program that finished 5th in a surprise finish last year in the Big 12 conference, and all of us enjoyed the run that they had. The postseason loss, the NCAA tournament loss to Duquesne, yeah, it left a bitter taste in the mouth of all of BYU fans when it came to going one and done in the tournament. But there is an overall, I think, investment / interest on the part of guys like Ryan Smith. Danny Ainge is a former alumnus of BYU, of the BYU basketball program in particular. They want to see this program stay among the best in the Big 12, if not become one of the premier programs in this conference. And I, for one, hey, as a podcaster who covers this day in and day out, I love when you have a winner to cover, because covering winners is a whole lot better than covering losers. And we'll see how it all goes. There's still obviously a lot of things to be sorted out. What is the staff going to look like? What is the overall look of BYU basketball going to be under now KYU, Kevin Young, as he takes over at BYU? There's a whole lot still to be answered, but I'm very, very impressed, at least on the early returns, without him even so much as actually dribbling a basketball with any of the players on the court, and that will come as things progress here. But we'll let you hear a little bit more from Kevin Young, what he hopes to do coming up next. Very interested to hear. I was very interested to hear, is what I should say, about his vision for BYU and why he was attracted to this position. There's a whole lot of questions because, like I said, this is a guy who spent 15 years in the NBA ranks, so he's a little bit of an enigma when it comes to the college coaching ranks. So what did he ultimately aspire / hope to do as BYU's head coach? Well, he will explain that coming up next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Yahoo Finance. Now, Yahoo Finance is here to help you guys with whatever you got going on, whether it's investments, retirement accounts, or anything in between or the like. They've got the options for you guys. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance to get you started along the way, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place to be the most successful that you can be. They are the #1 finance destination producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and many, many more options. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the right insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. You don't want to have just a piecemeal look at it. You want to see everything for what it is and be able to get the full look at it, and that's what Yahoo Finance can do it. And with over a community of over 90 million users each month, the real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. So for comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. That's yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination. That's yahoofinance.com. Once again, yahoofinance.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to remind you guys that the Locked On NFL Mock Draft is now available. It's the ultimate 6-episode series on the Locked On NFL Draft channel to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise in the upcoming NFL Draft. Also have live reactions from local college football experts, even the fantasy football angle included as well. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now on the Locked On NFL Draft channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's talk about Keving Young. Biggest thing I took away, just in particular from the press conference, was that I thought BYU fans should have been there in droves. Now, some reports emerged that BYU didn't want to quote unquote show up Mark Pope, and they didn't want to have a tit for tat deal with Kentucky. Okay, the way BYU produced this thing, it was a show. It should have had thousands of BYU fans in the Marriott Center, enjoying things, should have The Rock there. It was set up for that. The smattering of fans that were there, and a lot of them were high-level boosters, trust me, there were big names left, right, and center, and I don't blame them for being there, obviously, because this is a pretty big hire. But if you're going to do the production that BYU TV, that they put on and what they were doing in the arena, that BYU fans there. So I'll say that piece. The other thing is, speaking with Keving Young, as you'll hear in just a moment, but bigger point is this is a guy who feels like he is ready to take on this challenge. Now, only time will tell if he's going to ultimately be successful as the BYU men's basketball coach. That much is very, very clear. But you can tell the way he talks. He is excited to take this step. He is looking forward to being a head coach and having an opportunity to run things. He talked about the fact that he's been an offensive coach his entire time really in the NBA, and he wants to be a more well-rounded coach, obviously implementing defensive schemes and the like. So excited about that. He also said in an interview shortly after he did the main media session that he plans on having both Chris Paul and Devin Booker in Provo to work out with BYU players. Okay, you want to talk about a media bonanza? You get those two guys up here to Utah, and now we're talking. But that shows the reach that this guy has. He is well respected. I talked earlier about the KYU comment from Devin Booker, but if you go listen to that full clip, he is effusive in his praise about Keving Young. He also was a guy that was pushing for Keving Young to become the Phoenix Suns head coach when Monty Williams moved on and ultimately hired Frank Vogel. But he, speaking of Devin Booker, who was a bona fide NBA All-Star, his play, you might not be a fan of his, but his play, he's an all-star player. He wanted Keving Young to be his head coach, and he was effusive in his praise, said he got himself a good deal, looking forward to it. And it'd be good to have a guy like Devin Booker and or Chris Paul and whoever else, Joel Embiid, whoever wants to come out to Provo, get him out here, because that is going to absolutely make Provo a much quote-unquote cooler place if NBA stars are hanging around Utah in their offseason. All right, so interesting stuff. But I want to let you guys hear, I promised you we'd get to this. I had a chance, along with Patrick Kinahan, who I work with on a daily basis at the KSL Sports Zone, and Kevin Reynolds, a good friend from the Salt Lake Tribune. The three of us were able to chat with I want to say sit down, but we were standing, had a great chat with Keving Young, BYU new basketball coach, and you'll hear what he had to say to our questions right now.
What attracted you to this job in the first place? Because I know you had NBA options as a potential head coach.
Yeah, kind of what I was talking about in there. I mean, I'd say the overall scope of the position in terms of how good the situation is here in terms of the resources, the Big 12, this sustainability to win it and to do it for a long time. You know, family reasons, being able to give my wife and kids a little bit more stability that the NBA life doesn't offer was a huge component. And then again, to be able to do it, you know, in an environment where you know, the church and the school are aligned, and my family's aligned with that really was a huge factor in it.
When you navigate the transfer portal and kind of get into that world, is there any colleges that you've looked at or staffs that you've looked at you think that are doing it well and maybe you can emulate? Yeah, so as I'm talking about staffing, I'm trying to find guys who've had success with that portion of it, and I'm making some headway with some guys there. You know, it's such an integral part of success in today's landscape, so definitely tapping into people that have done it at other programs.
When you're a college head coach, you take on virtually every hat that could possibly be worn, as far as, you know, your own GM, you're a dad, and sometimes you're a babysitter and recruiting. Really, I mean, every coach, I've been doing this for 40 years, and they tell me that it's 24/7. And I know the travel is far more brutal in the NBA, but there's some things you don't have to deal with that you have to deal with here. How are you going to be prepared for it? It's just such an all-encompassing job now.
Yeah, I learned that pretty quickly on day one of the job. You know, like I said, I was on the phone nonstop, but you know, I knew it was going to be part of it. And yeah, the NBA is obviously much more about just basketball, but there's still so many things you have to do in the NBA too. I mean, the travel thing is one of those, and that's such a time-consuming component of the job. But you know, I'll be able to. That's why, again, I go back to the staff. It's such a huge piece to be able to insulate myself with people that are elite at navigating the college landscape from the recruiting standpoint, NIL standpoint, academic standpoint, and all the things that come with it. And I'm well aware of the figurehead role that I'm in. And but when you're running your own program, that comes with the territory. And so I'm just going to embrace it, dive into it, and you know, just enjoy the challenge that it presents.
Building off Kevin's question about the recruiting aspect, you have a brother who's been in the recruiting game for a long time. How big of a resource can he be for you? Yeah, no, he's always been a huge resource for me, honestly. Even when I got my first head coaching job in the old G League, you know, he helped me with some staffing things there. You know, he's my big brother, you know, so we're super close. He's super dialed in with the whole grassroots scene and knows everybody in the space. So he'll be a massive resource for me, and you know, look forward to tapping into that as much as I can.
Throughout the interview process, how much did you guys talk about the NIL infrastructure here, and did you kind of emphasize that as in being competitive and wanting to have like the long-term stability that you're talking about? Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my first questions. You know, I told someone else earlier, one of my best friends is the head coach at St. Joseph's University in Philly. We were coaches together with the 76ers, and you know, he was unbelievable in terms of peppering me with questions to ask, you know, all these guys to make sure I knew what I was getting into. But that gave me a ton of confidence, the answers they were giving me to those questions. This place wants to win, and they have the backing to do it, and it's really exciting.
How much do you think in the world of recruiting that it will be an advantage as you go out and talk to kids literally across the country and maybe internationally, big man, hey, you know, you might want to talk to this guy, and that guy just happens to be Embiid, or a shooting guard, hey, maybe you want to talk to this guy, and it happens to be Devin Booker, because obviously you can use those guys within the rules as resources. How much do you think that's an advantage?
I think it's a huge advantage. You know, if guys have aspiration to play in the NBA, that's what this place is going to be about. And I don't know if you're going to find a better place in the country that it's going to foster that. And so absolutely going to lean into those environments, but I wouldn't be able to lean into those if I didn't have good relationships with those guys that I coach. And Book's been incredible. You know, I love him. You know, he's been awesome to me, and we have a really good thing going. So, you know, I look forward to tying him into it.
I guess he's now calling this place KBYU.
KYU,
yeah.
There we go. No, that was a nice little play on words out of him, but that was pretty funny. Yeah.
One more question. Yeah, last thing for me is just with regards to this university had a pretty good season, all things considered. They picked 13th out of 14 in the preseason poll, finished 5th in the Big 12. What's your overarching ambition for this program to achieve while you're the head coach here?
Yeah. You know, the ultimate goal is to win a national championship. And when you're in the Big 12 and you have all the resources that this place offers, I mean, that is the ultimate goal. in terms of what they did last year, I mean, it's a credit to Mark and his staff and all those players that hopefully are wearing BYU uniforms in this coming up season. But it was remarkable what they did. So I'm just honestly trying to build on that and take it to another level.
There you go, Kevin Young, BYU men's basketball coach, and you heard him talk about he wants to build off of what Mark Pope and the BYU basketball program built, and that's the right way to go about it. Take what you can get and obviously build off of it, and BYU had a very successful campaign, so you might as well see what you can do with the pieces in place. Now, I will also add this. I meant to mention this a little bit earlier on. Dallin Hall and Tanner Hayhurst, who are two of the members of the BYU basketball program who have already entered the NCAA transfer portal, were in attendance at the festivities. I did not see the other two portal entrants in both Richie Saunders and Ali Khalifa. Now, does that mean they're out visiting other schools? TBD. I know there's a report out there that Ali Khalifa was going to visit Louisville, I believe today. So he may have already been on the road. Richie Saunders, I don't know what the situation is, but I'm still fairly confident that Richie will ultimately return. But Kevin, I want to say Kevin Reynolds, but Kevin Young told the media, hey, you guys, he pointed to the players, that you guys are the top priority. I want to see all y'all back here in uniform this fall. The fact that Dallin Hall showed up makes me more confident that he is going to consider strongly returning to BYU. Now, obviously, opportunities, NIL, and the like, that he's getting interest from Cal, St. Mary's, Creighton. The list goes on and on of the interest he's getting. Those ultimately could win out, but I thought it was a very, very good sign that Dallin Hall showed up for the new head coach to see all that was going on. And I will also add this. Danny Ainge, Utah Jazz CEO and obviously a BYU legend, he was in attendance at the festivities. And as we were kind of milling around after we did our media responsibilities, talking with Kevin Young and the like, guess who was talking for quite a period of time with Dallin Hall? Oh, yeah, that would be Danny Ainge. So we'll see what ultimately transpires on that front. All right, we will finish up today's edition of the podcast. And by the way, I want to say a big thank you to BYU Sports Information as well as Kevin Young for being so gracious with their time. Hopefully you guys took something away from that from Kevin, but I will just say this, one other thing. My overall impression, you're probably wondering about that. What do you think, Jake? I'm impressed. My impression is I am impressed. Yeah, there we go. I really think that Kevin Young knows what he is getting into here. You can tell that he's got a level of excitement, but I think he speaks very frankly and openly about acknowledging what he doesn't know. That is an important thing. There are a lot of people out there in the coaching ranks who have a lot of hubris who would come in and say, we're gonna light the world on fire and we're gonna knock it out of the park. I thought he was very, very upfront about things that he was obviously going to have to adapt to. Recruiting after 15 years in the NBA. He mentioned it's kind of become more of a free agency model in the NBA, but it's still different. PK talked about the fact that you have so many hats you're wearing. You are the GM, you are the parent, you're the babysitter at times. You got to be able to handle all that. And he said, I'm ready for it. So I look forward to seeing how this ultimately transpires and how it all goes for Kevin Young. But my impression is that it was a great, great debut for him. He quote unquote won the press conference, but now the real work begins. And obviously doesn't really begin until he shows up in Provo full time after the run for the Phoenix Suns gets over in the NBA playoffs. I will tell you this much. I have never rooted harder for the Minnesota Timberwolves than I'm going to be for the next week plus. So congratulations, Minnesota. You have gained a legion of fans, I think, out there when it comes to Kevin Young and the Phoenix Suns, and the hope that he'll be in Provo in short order. But it sounds like he is working hard on his staff as well. And I think getting those guys in place as soon as humanly possible is very, very critical as well. All right. We will finish out this edition of the podcast with some quick thoughts. Let's just put it this way. The era of transfer portal and unlimited transfers, it appears it is here to stay, folks. There's no putting the genie back in that bottle. We'll talk about what that means for BYU, what it means for the sports universe and college athletics in particular, with all that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. Now, my friends, all of us have a competitive side. I admit I've got a very, very competitive streak in me. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I downloaded it just the other day. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is you can mess with your friends or your enemies, as it were, on this. You can charge them rent from your iconic properties. lotteries just like classic Monopoly. But you also can break into their vaults and steal their money and enrich yourself. The leaderboards show you exactly who has the biggest Monopoly money, who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is, and you can go and raid their money as well. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards as well. So take advantage of the opportunity today and get in the game and join your friends right now. That's Monopoly Go. Download it free on the App Store or Google Play Store. Once again, that's Monopoly Go, available now on the App Store and Google Play. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to remind you guys, if you have not done so already, please join our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Really, really having a great time. I've been passing along intel that I am learning in real time, and it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. I say it often on this podcast. I want you guys to be the most informed and smartest BYU fans in the room. Well, one other thing that can help you do that is be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Click the link in the show notes below. 14-day free trial, and then obviously $5 a month afterwards for access. But I, just speaking frankly, think it's well worth the money. And I've got a number of endorsements from those who are already in the group that I would say that very thing. So thank you for those of you who have signed up so far and you don't want to miss out. Join us today. It's half the price of certain other things out there when it comes to insider content on BYU Sports. All right, let's talk about a couple of things before we go on today's show. The world of college athletics continues to just be topsy-turvy in nature, but the NCAA Division I Council has adopted two new proposals. The first one, they adopted new transfer rules that align with the current situation related to the court injunction that was filed by the AGs of Tennessee and Virginia, which suspended any ability for the NCAA to stop multiple time transfers without penalty. Well, the NCAA essentially is making it so now unlimited transferring for athletes is possible, but they did add the one caveat. You have to have academic requirements met. What that means, you got to be in good academic standing at the university you're transferring from. And also, you've got to be, as they call, working towards your degree. They have like these benchmarks for each year you're in college. They have to be progressing towards a degree. They don't want people just hanging out, taking classes, and playing sports. They want people actually working on their education. So long as you're in good academic standing, according to the NCAA, and this is supposed to be finalized next week by the head honchos of the NCAA, but it appears the era of unlimited transfers is here. Now, that obviously can be a boon to programs if you take advantage of it. Also can kill you. Let's be honest. Look at Colorado right now. Remember how much of a turnover that Deion Sanders put on last year? Was it 70 of their 80 scholarship players, 75 of the 85 scholarship players or some such were turned over? Well, the transfer portal window just opened 2 days ago, and Colorado's are at 14 guys from last year's team that have entered the portal already, and including some very, very talented players in their own right. The transfer portal taketh, the transfer portal giveth, and it'll be interesting to see how BYU in particular adapts to this, because the era now is a guy like the Caden Proctor situation. He went to Alabama. Nick Saban retires. He says, hey, I want to go home to play for Iowa. Goes to Iowa, signs some big NIL deal with a local auto dealership there in Iowa. And oh, by the way, 4 months later, guess who's back in the transfer portal and going right back to Alabama? It's a pretty tough look for Caden Proctor, but that's kind of what you've opened up. It's the can of worms that exists here. I'm not saying that BYU is going to be subject to it, but the era of multiple time transfers and transferring 2 and 3 times potentially in a calendar year, it is absolutely a possibility. So get ready for it. Now, the other thing is that there's a change coming to NIL guidelines, name, image, and likeness guidelines. What it is going to allow schools to assist student athletes with NIL opportunities if those student athletes disclose the NIL activities valuing $600 or more to their schools. So essentially, NIL is coming home to roost, and it's going to be an in-house venture. No longer are you going to have the quote-unquote Wild West out there running these NIL deals, and obviously, the universities will control them. I have got some concern that control in the circumstance where the school would control it, they're going to be athletes who are going to want to do things that are just not going to fly with the university. So I wonder how much restriction there will be. But it's very interesting that NIL was supposed to be this third-party thing. Well, guess what? It's coming in-house, and that obviously is going to require more staffers. I'm sure there'll be some collective folks. I would imagine BYU potentially has some folks working with both Coug Connect and the Royal Blue, the two major collectives around BYU athletics. I could very easily see some of those folks being brought in-house if this ultimately is something that you do bring in-house, or if they just decide to keep it on the outside and allow the Royal Blue and Coug Connect to operate the way that they've been operating. It's just a very interesting time. But the era of regulation of NIL is coming, and it is going to allow the universities to regulate it themselves. And when has that ever been a cluster / success? It's had every which way it could possibly go, and it will continue to be that way, it feels like, going forward. All right. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Thursday. So any other thoughts that pop up between now and tomorrow, I'll be sure to pass those along to you as well. Anything else I hear on the Kevin Young front. We probably need to talk a little bit about BYU football and the transfer portal window. We talked about Colorado for just a little bit there, but the transfer portal window has been open for almost 3 full days now. So what does it mean for BYU football? What am I hearing on that front? We'll probably dig into that on tomorrow's podcast as well. But until then, thank you for all of your support. I truly do appreciate all of you for being along for the ride, no matter how you consume it, whether you're watching this on YouTube, you listen to it when you're at the gym, on your commute, no matter how you consume the podcast. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. We have thousands of BYU fans who are stopping by every single day. And a big thank you to all of you once again for making it your first listen of the day. And as we often say, thank you for being everydayers with us here on the podcast as well. So until tomorrow, my friends, have a great rest of your day. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.